Addy soldiers. It's perfect! Ooh, I'm drinking coffee at a time of day I should not be drinking coffee, but I feel like the danger makes it more delicious. Ugh, I made this one strong too. But I like my coffee like I like my books. Thick. So a couple of weeks ago I did a video on new adult and how it is just red flag central, and how there's a lot of weird stuff that comes up in new adult labeled novels that I'm not about. And of course I mentioned, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna make a video about some good new adult books, and then it's been like how long now? And if you haven't seen my OG video where I had long hair and bangs talking about what new adult is, you can click that up there. And I will give you yet another quick and dirty version so that people understand what I mean when I say new adult or young adult or regular adult. So I like to read young adult books for the most part, and young adult books are books that have protagonists ages 13 to 18-ish. Originally anything above that age bracket was just generalized as like just general fiction, but recently more and more people have been starting to talk about something called new adult, where you have books with protagonists ages 19 to 24-ish. And just like it sounds like, something like a young adult book would talk about themes of like self-discovery, self-identity, family, first love, all the things you go through as a teenager, whereas new adult books go through the things that you're going to experience as a new adult, like living on your own for the first time. So a lot of these books, you know, center around college, going away to college, moving to a different country, being independent for yourself, discovering your sexuality and mental health. Now, because it's so new and because it's not really recognized as a genre by itself, there's a ton of books that have characteristics like content and the age of the protagonist that would label it as like a new adult book, but it doesn't really exist as a genre, so it's just in regular fiction. But it's also a bit of a content thing, so a lot of books that maybe have younger protagonists but heavier gore or sexuality or trauma are not labeled as a new adult, but they should be based on content. So there's like a big blurry mess of a crossover of what classifies young adult, new adult, regular fiction. Now the main focus of my red flags and new adult video was about how sexuality is very heavily written about and pushed in new adult, because I think people are under the impression that this is a point in your life when you're going to be experiencing more sex and sexuality. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. Education and representation all around. But what I said was basically that the authors are going about portraying this in maybe some unhealthy and abusive ways that should not be romanticized, which is also difficult to extract that from the genre, because new adult sort of started in romance, where you would have young adult romance where like you hold hands and kiss, being adorable, into like hardcore romance, all this stuff is happening. I should not be doing that hat movement. So new adult is kind of the like slightly less hardcore that goes into things like self-actualization and sexuality and trauma and gore, and usually more fighting and violence and like gray morality questions and all that good stuff you can't really get into in a young adult. And sort of relating to my last video as well, new adult books have a lot of questionable conflicts. Like there's a lot of fighting for no reason, communication issues for no reason, and then a lot of stuff that's portrayed as passion, but really it's just someone being aggressive or abusive. But because it started as a contemporary genre, it's a little difficult to say that other genres are new adult friendly. Like you don't really say, oh, it's a new adult fantasy. Because if that was the case, books like Nevernight by J. Kristoff, or, oh god, Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, or A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab would all count as new adult because they have characters in their like very late teens or early 20s. I think the thing that really kicked off the new adult being like a new adult was, dare I say, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, because even though this is shelved in the adult section, which it sure as hell should not be, this was the first like mainstream big name book to get marketed as new adult. And just like that, her other one, Crescent City, has also been labeled new adult. Now, these are not good representations of what relationships and conflict should be. I'm just saying it. You can still like them, but I'm just saying it. And because in July I went through this big phase of just trying to find every single new adult labeled book I could, mostly for that other video, I've read a whole lot recently, and I have a couple that were already on my shelf, so without further ado, let me give you a video of actually good new adult books. The one we're going to start off with is one that blurs that line between young adult and new adult, and I'm sure many of you have already heard of it, but just in case, Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell technically is a new adult book. This deals with a girl named Kath who is moving away to college and staying in a dorm, and how she deals with being an introvert and a writer and someone who's shy and dealing with being on her own for the first time and not having her family nearby and taking classes and dealing with boys. Even though there's not any explicit content like sex or violence or I think any deep mental trauma, just the fact that the setting and the age of the character, I believe she's 19, just makes this fall into a new adult category without giving it the new adult label. This is a really good one to start off if you want to start getting into new adult, or if you have someone in your life who's transitioning into a new adult. It's adorable, it's fun, it goes into like self-identity and being an introvert, so like as an introvert writer, I enjoyed this book about an introvert writer who writes fanfiction. And then I'll recommend a book that I'm sure everybody has already read, but it needs to be said because if I left this out, it would be an abomination. And that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. God, this book is just so damn cute. I love them. In an alternate reality, we have Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States, and Henry, who is a Prince of England. They fight and then have to figure out a way to like fake their friendship for the presses, and then eventually they fall in love, and it's so cute! If you count politics as explicit content, which some of you might, especially if you live in the United States, this was very intense. The topics in this book do deal with a little bit more explicit content than a young adult book. Like, there are some sex scenes and there is a lot of self-introspection on a deeper level, mostly because of the two characters, Alex being bi and Henry being gay. So there is a little bit more into the LGBTQ politics of the world, which is, you know, a little bit more deeper than maybe like your random 14-year-old picking up a cute book. But this also has wonderful themes about expectations and like where you're going with your life and the relationships that you build along the way. It's like celebrity and friendship, but also talks about privilege quite a bit. I loved this book. I read this in one day. It was so worth it. Alright, so has everyone forgotten about this book? Because I feel like it went, you know, it went viral for like a month and then everyone just forgot about it. So, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo still exists, and yes, is in fact a new adult book. I know this one got marketed as new adult, mostly because there are a couple of scenes in here that are questionable. So we have some dark magic cults over at Yale, which, I mean, like, if that was real, that would track. Our main character is very morally gray, and there's a lot of more critical thinking to this book than a young adult book would. It's dark, it's gritty, we do have stuff about sex and sexuality, but it's not overly explicit. I think it's more like the background tones, if that makes any sense, that make this not a young adult book. I'm actually quite happy that she made this book a quote-unquote new adult book instead of a young adult, because I think that the grittiness and the darkness and like really being able to get into like the deep dark human psyche really added to this book, and I think it made it very atmospheric, very weird, very creepy, very thrilling. That if she had cut out some of the intensity, I don't think it would have been as strong as the book. So that's why I quite like new adult, because it's like ramping it up, but it still has the pacing and some of the fun characterization of a young adult book. Not that I call these characters fun, but like, you know. Since that one was more of a fantasy and I have some more contemporaries and fantasies to go, let us now talk about a... Wait, hold on. It's been a day, guys. It's been a day. Let us talk about one of my favorite contemporaries. I highly, highly, highly recommend the Deeper Duology by Robin York. This is about Carolyn, who during her college experience, her ex leaks her nudes as a part of revenge porn against her. So while her reputation and her life is falling apart due to the fallout of having her naked body on the internet, which is something that is maybe not a young adult topic, she rekindles a friendship with someone named West, who also goes to her college, and they basically have a relationship, but it's real and it's sloppy and it's messy and it's perfect. This is the kind of book that does a beginning relationship right. Like, there's obviously passion and there's a want to help the other person. West is dealing with his own issues, and we do get a dual point of view, so we get to see like who's into what and where everyone's mental state's at. These two characters have their own shit happening and they are trying to still make it work. So I really like the fact that it goes back and forth of like, hey, everybody is a real person and everybody has problems, and even though you may want something, this might not be the time or the place that it's going to happen for you. So like, yeah, there's some sexy times in here, but we also have a lot of stuff about trauma and identity and standing up for yourself and becoming the person that you want to be. I love this series so much. In fact, she wrote another book that I also quite enjoyed, great segue, called Truly. Also, this is her pen name, so I do mean the same person. This is about a girl named May who very publicly dumps her very famous boyfriend friend, and while wandering about New York City bumps into an ex-chef named Ben, and it's their like week before she has to fly back to see her family in a different state. As somebody who has actually lived in Manhattan, I can say this is a love letter to New York. What a beautiful book that speaks so much about the city, and it's so wonderful. It really encompasses like the culture of New York and like the multiculturalism and how people view it and how people live in it. But because it only takes place over about a week, I really liked the way that she talked about relationships and how quickly people can build those connections, and how easily they can break, but also like what you decide to fight for and how you decide to change your own life. So I'd say while this book follows a more traditional romance plot line, I still, because of the age of the characters and like just the way that she writes and the way that the story comes apart, I would say that this is definitely a new adult, and I really, really enjoyed it. Ooh, let's do a fantasy now. I spoke a little bit about this in the new adult book video, but I want to talk about it again, and that is Storm and Fury by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, I said that this book is great. Her newest book, For Blood and Ash, is awful. So don't read that one, read this one. This book is wild. Like, we got demons and angels and gargoyle guardians. Like, it's a very imaginative fantasy world, I will give her that. See, this book falls into all those tropey tropes about like the possessive guy, the special snowflake girl, fantasy world that no one else can see, extra sexual tension, but like it does it well. Ugh. Like, Zane and Trinity have chemistry, and yes, they banter and they snark at each other, but like it in a good way. Like, it makes sense. Like, they have something to work off of instead of just being mean to each other for no reason and then suddenly kissing. Like, no, like, they build up a relationship. There's consent and communication and positive self-discovery. Oh, we are 3 for 3. Although, side note, I find it absolutely hilarious that this main character has vision problems, so she can't really see very well if someone has their hand out in front of them, but she can still hit a target from 30 paces away, and she can definitely see this main dude character's abs. Like, this universe has Netflix, but apparently no contact lenses. Jennifer L. Armentrout has some hits or misses in her little new adult empire that she's built herself, but this one I highly recommend. Read this one, not the other one. And then one that I picked up when I did work at Back at the Bookstore like 3 years ago, that I picked up on a whim. It ended up being so freaking good and talks about topics that we don't even talk about in regular fiction, and that is Fangirl by Leah Raeder. I know since writing this book they actually have transitioned, but I don't know what his name is now, and the internet is not being very helpful at first glance, so if I can find it, I'll leave it in the description down below, but I do believe that this is still their pen name for a lot of stuff. So this book is about a girl named Veda, who is a cam girl and a sex worker. While this book did have explicit content, it wasn't necessarily all about the sex. It was mostly based on the psychological aspects of being a sex worker and being somebody who was in that world. So it's about her not only navigating her career and her life, but it's also about her navigating her relationships between other people in the house that she lives in and the people that she works for. I will also say this book does not really give a positive or negative stance on sex work. It kind of just shows the everyday goings on, and the main character is in it because she wants to be in it. There's nothing weird happening, okay? There is consent within this book at all times. But there's also other characters in here that I really love that not only, I think the main character is bisexual, but also it talks about a character who's trans, and there's a non-binary, and there's a gender fluid character, and I love all of them. I think it's great representation. Yes, there is a romance plotline in here, and how it is set up with a variety of sexualities is really interesting and really good, and I love the way that this book was written. And of course, our main character has her own past and own trauma that she's unpacking and has to deal with, especially moving into a new stage of her life, and just everything about this was great. Oh, did I get lipstick on this shirt? Oh dear. And then lastly is a book that I really, really enjoyed, and I was not expecting to, because at this point of my reading journey of July, it was just like one disappointment after the other. I was not expecting this one to be any good, and it was great. So let me introduce you to Wraith Kings by Wraith Kings by Grace Draven. This is a very unique fantasy world. So on one case we have the humans and the palaces and all the regular human fantasy, Middle Ages-esque fantasy world stuff. And then we also have on the other side of the mountains the Kai, which are this other fantasy race that are like sort of like elves, sort of like trolls. They're really tall, have gray skin, are nocturnal, and have these giant lamplighter eyes and very sharp teeth. The main two characters are meeting each other as a part of a political alliance marriage. This book subverted a lot of expectations because of course you have the like, they're going to hate each other and then eventually they're gonna fall in love, but like no, they actually started off this book basically seeing each other and being like, hey man, this sucks. I don't really want to be in this marriage. I'm sure you don't either. but like, we can be friends, and then they do, and it's adorable! They both like treat each other with care and like want to help the other person acclimatize to their culture, and even though they're not attracted to each other at first, because like the human girl is like, oh man, this guy's scary looking, and then the guy is looking at her being like, why is her skin so pink? It's very strange. She looks like undercooked shellfish, which like, same. Then she steps up into the role of being a Kai princess and he starts learning more and more about human culture. They do start to fall in love and they become this like power couple of an interracial, interspecies marriage. It's great! Now this is only an ebook and I only read the first one, but I think that I might download the rest of the series because these were pretty great. As far as new adult goes, like A+, 110%. We are winning over here with this one. So there you have it. There are a bunch of new adult books that don't suck, that are actually good, that show decent plot lines, good communication skills, and an accurate representation, or maybe accurate fantasy representation, about what actually happened in a new adult's life. Cheers to that. Alright, this robe is a lot warmer than I was expecting it to be. Ooh. This is a look though. Please leave down below if you have your own suggestions on new adult books because again, it's not really a genre. I kind of think it should be, but that's just me. Plus, like I said before, there's a lot of gray area, a lot of crossover, which is fun, which is great. But all the reading lists that I ever look up that are new adult are just like all Colleen Hoover, and I'm not for it. My favorite in young adult books are the books where we have a main character that finds out that they're a secret royalty and they have to save the world and they get a magic sword and a found family of travelers and they get to like go around having adventures and like doing magic. Why can't I have that? But like with the character being like 24 and she's like seeing some shit and like has understood the world a little better and like makes smart decisions like a teenager wouldn't, you know? She's like, man, that guy's hot, but like, I gotta do my own thing right now. I don't have time for you. The like, hey, pick these 3 things, and she's like, well, I'm obviously not gonna pick that one, that's a trap, duh. Like, where are those books? I want those books. Like, I want a story that's in between the wide-eyed, bright, naive, young adult character who's just like doing their best, and the like 35-year-old married with kids decides to frame her husband for a murder kind of fiction novel, you know? You know where to click like the video, you know where to click to subscribe. I hope you guys are all having a nice day wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!